Everybody's beautiful in their own way. Hello, my gardening friends. Welcome to your favorite garden show, brought to you each week for your enjoyment. I'm Dr. John, your host, and today I have a gentleman coming on who's going to give us some landscaping ideas, and he's going to talk about some of the terrible damage that we had with the winter and how to care for a beautiful lawn. And before T.B.I, and his company is T.B.I, and the gentleman's name is Tom Makris, and he's going to come on and talk about that. But before we do that, let's talk about the plant of the week. I always have two plants of the week, as you well know. And the first one here, step forward. It's a very pretty plant, Mandevilla, okay? Dipladenia is a Latin name for it. This is a tropical, folks, okay? But it's sold in the garden centers in the springtime as a vine to go up a trellis or over an archway and so forth. And the reason they sell it like that is because this rascal can get 15 to 20 feet long. It'll travel up. But it does like the sunshine. The hotter, the better. Although it does take a little bit of shade. And the flowers are approximately 2 to 4 inches wide. And it likes a little fertilizer, like 10, 20, 10. And plant this in your yard or in a pot, over an arbor or a hanging basket or however you wish to use it. And then in this fall, cut it back and bring it in and treat it like a house plant. Now these leaves were the flowers were all closed when I brought it in this morning because I had it in my car all night. This closes up at night, so I had to let it sit out in the sun in the parking lot for a while to get those flowers to open up. But now you have learned a new plant. It's a very attractive plant. I have another plant over here. I'm going to set it up here. Stand up here now, young fella. Up we go. Up, there we go. This happens to be, there we go. This happens to be Foxglove, okay? And this Foxglove, digitalis is another name for it, grows in the sun and in the shade, and it attracts butterflies. And also, what is nice about this, it's deer resistant, okay? Has a good flower, and it can get as much as 3 feet tall, and blooms all summer long. It's sometimes called a biannual, but this plant is something different in your yard. Look at the flowers. Joe, zoom in on that. See those pretty flowers? And this rascal will get 3 feet tall. Put it somewhere in the garden as a perennial. Don't put it up front. Put it in the middle or towards the back, and you'll be surprised at the beauty. You know, when you think about perennials, not many people know about this foxglove. Give it a try. Hey, let's take 30 seconds out for a thank you message, and when we come back, let's talk about landscaping. Stay tuned.
There's a much simpler way to care for your lawn.
Tell me!
Let the expert lawn technicians at T.B.I take care of it for you. T.B.I gives you the highest quality of lawn care. All of our experts are certified, licensed, and insured, with complete turf care programs to maintain your lawn's color and vigor, and minimizing weeds throughout the growing season. A service program will be recommended for your lawn during your free lawn evaluation. T.B.I, locally owned and operated since 1985. We put quality first.
Hi folks, if you just tuned in, you're watching Gardening News and Views with Dr. John, and I'm your host. And today we have a gentleman coming on, Tom Makris from T.B.I. And Tom should be here right about now. Tom, come on in.
Oh, hello, John. How are you?
Thank you very much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Pull up a stool here,
Thank you.
and let's talk a little bit here. There we go. I saw some of your jobs that you've done around Northern Virginia, and I've stopped a couple of times to talk with your men. They do one darn good job.
Well, that's very kind of you to say.
And that's why I took your name off the truck, and I talked to the guys, and I said, and this is the second time you've been on. You were on about a year ago.
It's a pleasure to be back, and hopefully we can help. I was going to come on here and try to promote our business, but instead I kind of feel like we need to do a little public service and talk about some plants that are damaged over the winter.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Our company has been in business for almost 30 years now.
30 years.
And we're primarily in the lawn and landscape care business. We don't do mowing and we don't do pruning. We're basically a chemical lawn care company.
And they certainly need the care this year.
They certainly do. We've had a fairly harsh winter, and it's left a lot of our plant material in disrepair. Most gardeners are probably nervous, and so hopefully you and I can calm them down a little bit about some of their plant material.
All right, well, I'm going to kind of turn the show over to you, and what do you want to start with now?
What we normally do this time of year, and we're a little bit behind schedule, is spring crabgrass controls and those kinds of things. And the reality is that we can start those kind of programs as early as the middle of February. But this year,
with the snow and the weather, tell me about it.
Yeah, they always say that the forsythia and the daffodils are sort of the Earth's thermometer and tells you when you're supposed to be out and starting all these spring chores. Well, none of that happened on time. However, the plants are now blooming, and the nice thing is that the plants that are blooming late are also in concert with the ones that are actually blooming on time, which has led us to actually a very beautiful spring.
Yeah. Well, now there's many kinds of pre-emerges on the market, and I know you fellas use the. Tell what have you been using now? What?
Well, there are a number of them. Obviously, if we're trying to promote new grass growth, then we're using something called Sidgeron. And that's one that you can utilize when you plant grass seed. Prodiamine is a product that we've had great success with in the past, and that's our staple.
Well, let's go back to Sidgeron again. And folks, get a pad and paper out, okay? Write some of these things down. Sidgeron, Tom just said that you can seed with that, either the day before or the day after or any time, right?
That's correct.
Although the rate goes on a little different. They have to watch that because you cut the rate down a little, don't you?
And it's not a hugely effective crabgrass control. The others are much better, but obviously we have had so much moisture in the past 14 months that a lot of the shady lawns were actually drowned. There was no oxygen left in the pores of the soil. The water had displaced all the oxygen, and these plants just depleted. So we're finding ourselves seeding a lot of areas that otherwise would have had at least a reasonable stand of grass.
Now, the other product you use, you can't seed with for 60 days or so, right?
Right, and it's sort of a time-released activity because you want it to sort of disappear before you get into the fall where you want to reseed. And we use Prodiamine. There's a number of good ones, though.
Yeah.
Team is one of the old school ones. Dimension's another one. We've had our best success with one called Prodiamine, which...
Prodiamine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, many people think that they got to put crabgrass preventer in the entire yard. That was a true statement if there's not a tree in sight. But in the shady areas, you don't have the crabgrass grow much, do you?
No, you don't. And that's a fair assessment. And actually, going under an IPM type program, we try to resist putting down those controls where they're not necessary. We have had some great success, though, controlling some other grassy weeds that do grow in the shade, utilizing some of those varieties.
Well, that's true, too, yeah.
One that comes to mind is one they call Japanese stilt grass, or Microstegium, I believe is a...
Oh, that's a tough one to kill.
It is, but you can get pretty good results if you use a pre-emergent at the proper time.
Well, now, for those people who are really die-hard organic people, they don't want to use any kind of chemical, there is a product that you can use, the corn gluten?
Yes.
And you folks use that occasionally when necessary?
Under special request normally. It's an expensive product. It has a very small area in home lawn care because it's such a competitive business.
Yeah.
But we'll try to do whatever we can to customize a service for anybody that would.
And by the way, folks, when I was out looking at some of their jobs, and they put little flags up, let you know that they've been there, and so that you know the dog and the cat and the kids, don't you? You let people know.
In Virginia, that's not been mandated, but we find it's a nice advertisement as well as letting you know
that
you were there doing something, to allow it to at least try. There has been some new regulation out there in the state of Virginia and in Maryland also. We don't actually work the Maryland territory. We're mainly in Northern Virginia. And that is that there is no phos in the turf fertilizers.
No phosphorus.
Correct.
Yeah.
The ornamental fertilizers you still can promote with some phosphorus, which you want because that helps promote flower and fruit. But in green turf fertilizers, they're recommending 0.
Yeah. For those of you who are just getting used to gardening and are at your home for the first time and getting to learn a little bit about this, pardon me, when he says no phosphorus, that means the formula would read like a 24, 0, 10. In other words, the middle numbers of phosphorus, okay? And the first number, of course, is nitrogen, and the last one's potash.
Yeah, it's a little concerning that we aren't allowed to put that material down, but I only say a little bit because that element is found pretty
much in the soil anyway.
It is, but it does require now that we take some soil tests, and we're accurate with those soil tests. If something comes up deficient, then we can make those adjustments. And we utilize Virginia Tech to help us do our soil testing program, and we found it to be very effective. But it's something that we think is paramount in establishing good turf in our area. And I think also if you have any sort of a plant issue other than winter damage this year, it's probably a good idea to have the soil tested for that particular type of plant, because a lot of times you'll find an acid-loving plant growing in a culture that doesn't make it happy.
That's right.
So if you're trying to grow an azalea in an alkaline soil, it's not going to perform well.
I'm glad you brought that up. Watch this, folks. Just a second. I got to get up here. Where did I do it? Here's one. Where's the other one? Oh man, did I lose it? Oh, here it is. He was talking about making acid or alkaline. Look at this.
Oh yeah.
I don't want the price on here because I can't do the price. There we go. Yeah, I'm going to set this up here while you're talking for a minute.
Well, that's interesting because you chose to pull out hydrangea plant food, and I mentioned earlier that forsythia and daffodils tell you when the ground temperature coming up. Well, these guys are known as the pH barometers of the soil.
That's right.
So, and you're going to explain why pink and blue are significant.
Yes, if you want your hydrangeas blue, you go in the garden center or the box store or wherever you do your shopping, and of course you have that anyway in your trucks.
Well, we try to promote whatever color they like.
Or pink, yes, yeah, and you would know how to put that on and all that. So this is kind of nice to know.
Yeah, it is interesting, and some of the hydrangeas, of course, had a lot of damage from this winter, as. They were just starting to bud out. The buds were very succulent, and we had one little last hit of winter, which basically froze those buds right on the stems.
My hydrangeas were about that high.
Well, you might as well cut them in half.
And they're dead right down to the bottom. They're coming up now at the bottom, and a little bit up. Maybe they're coming up about 6 inches up from the soil. There's a little bit of growth, but the rest is dead.
Well, this is where I said we need to kind of talk people down off the ledge. Because at least those hydrangeas are alive. We've seen gardenias throughout the area that I don't think are going to make it. A lot of hollies are damaged, but I do believe, and in fact we're already seeing the fact that they're growing out of their condition.
Now, I'd like to go back on that gardenia a minute because
sure.
That gardenia, folks, is a tropical, but they've developed a hybrid gardenia that does grow outdoors. However, this past winter was an exceptional one. Hasn't been that cold in 20 years.
Yeah, we didn't have a tremendous amount of snow, but the cold was just unbearable.
Now, I have found out that in the gardenia, if you wish to buy them, and they're beautiful, and they smell so good, you put them by the front door, and as you walk in, don't not buy them now. You can still buy the gardenias, but come this winter, mulch that dude heavy, right?
I would agree with that.
Real good.
The fragrance of the gardenia is the thing that's so attractive about it. Yes. And I think if you do want to plant exterior installation of fragrant plants, you might look at things that are a little bit hardier, perhaps lilac or something of that nature. Gardenia as a whole doesn't. But
you'd have to either put wrap burlap around it and mulch it good and make it survive.
Yeah, I get a little jaded, John, just because I've got to go out and explain why something died. And sometimes the answer is things die, and people don't like to hear that.
I planted a beautiful camellia last fall for a friend of mine, and he called me up and he says, "John, it's dead." Talk about the camellias for a minute.
Yeah, actually, there's you talked about the hybridization of the gardenia. We have some beautiful camellias out now that aren't as finicky as the old-fashioned ones, and they're actually pretty winter hardy, but they don't look real good this year, and the blossoms are non-existent. I expect the majority of those will survive, but don't expect too many pretty flowers this year.
And what's Tom's telling you folks is don't yank those bushes out too fast.
No, don't.
Give them a drink, put a little fertilizer around, high nitrogen fertilizer around, work it in and water it in, and just wait a while, and probably by Mother's Day you'll see a big difference.
I absolutely agree. I've been trying to talk people down off that ledge, ripping stuff out and replacing it. Although in some cases the damage is so severe, it has to be done.
My Nandina got froze back.
What didn't get frozen, the deer ate. So.
Yeah. And then the azaleas got tinged too.
Yes, they did. But it's interesting. The azaleas, the blossoms are very, very profuse this year. So I'm pretty certain that once that energy is gone from the blossoming, then you'll find a lot of leaves following.
Right.
And then you can promote with foliar fertilizer or something of that nature.
Yeah. So, well, now what else are we going to talk about here now? You're going to go into the lawn a little bit about diseases?
Well, I think talking about lawns a bit. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that's occurred is that people have not been able to get out and do their gardening. So normally your first mowing is around the 1st of April. And here we are, as we sit here in these chairs, it's darn near the 3rd week of April. And we're just now getting out and cutting. So if you get out in your garden, you find that the grass is a little higher than you would like, you know, I request that you cut it just as high as possible and actually leave it high as possible. One of the things that people tend to try to follow suit with golf courses and cut the grass too low. Don't try this at home, folks, because these guys are true professionals at the golf course industry. You're not a stunt man at home. Mow the grass high in Virginia, and you're probably going to have a much better result or product.
Isn't there a rule that no more than a third of the green leaf should be cut off?
Agreed.
No more than a third. In fact, the leaves on any plant are the employees of the plant. They're the employees.
Agreed.
And if you cut back your business on your employees, you're in trouble sometimes, right? If you cut your grass back too low, hey, your plant is in trouble.
Exactly. The turf overall, though, particularly out in full sun, is actually going to be very lush. My next concern is, do we go from winter to summer, and do these plants have a chance to harden before we go into those high temperatures?
Yeah, that's right.
We want a transition period, particularly after all the stress these plants have been through.
Now, I've been telling people that call me, and after watching the show, they'll call my house and so forth, and they'll ask me a question about seeding and so forth. You can seed and fertilize the same day. You don't have to wait. You know, you can seed and fertilize the same day.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And you can put the lime down. There's different kinds of lime, of course. You do the liming? You talk. Go ahead.
We do. Again, based on a soil report that we'll get by collecting samples in your yard, send them off to university. They'll give us pH readings as well as major, macro, and minor nutrient count. From there, we kind of try to customize and design a program that best suits your environment or strata. Limestone as a whole, I think, should be an important part of turf care in Northern Virginia because our clay soils are self-acidifying to a certain degree.
It's about 5.5 in Northern Virginia. It should be up there around 7. And definitely up there if you want to grow vegetables.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's, again, I think a good basis for that, though, is starting with a good soil test. And doing that, you have to take sub-tests from all over, say, 1/3 of an acre per lot. And that way you'll get a good picture or an illustration of the entire plot.
Well, now, what about aerating and dethatching? Some people come in, they'll ask about that, or they'll call me and say, when do I need to dethatch, or when should I be aerating, or should I doing it at all?
Yeah, and we have philosophy on that. Before we dethatch a lawn, we would prefer to do something a little less stressful to the plant, which is to aerify the soil. Right. That'll help to help decompose those thatch layers down. Mm-hmm. We have found, since we've been promoting less pesticide usage, thatch accumulations are not near what they used to be back in the 70s when we were putting down some of the harsher type insecticides.
Back in the 60s and the 70s, they used to think that the thatch was the clippings that were on the lawn, but it's not the clippings at all, folks. The clippings are good for the grass.
Absolutely.
It's the nitrogen as it rots away.
Absolutely. It can actually protect the soil as well as it decomposes. Yeah, the microbial activity in the soil was reduced by a lot of heavy pesticide usage. It made our job easier because we didn't have to worry about bugs. Now we have to be smarter. We have to diagnose bugs, thresholds, and then put the appropriate product down.
You do insect control. Yes.
And it's a little more difficult than it used to be. You used to have one size fits all. You put down one product and you get rid of everything. Well, now you have a lot of different product that you have to use.
Chloridine's gone, diazinin's gone.
Yeah, and for good reason. I mean, some of those were pretty harsh, but the reality is we have to become smarter turf managers now. And I think aeration's a big part of that.
And of course, what about diseases though? That can be a problem. I've been recommending people to use Daconil on their lawn for many diseases. In fact, Daconil for a lot of diseases.
Yeah, actually, Daconil was deregulated for turf use in Virginia.
It was. I'm glad you brought that up. See,
but you can still use it for ornamentals, which I think it's a superior product. A lot of times, our funguses, which are molds and mildews in the last 14 months, will repair themselves if allowed. The thing to do is to look at the new tissue emerging. If you see lesions on there, you probably got an active problem that needs to be looked at and resolved. If the new growth, and I'm going to use Akuba as an example, Akuba gets this necrosis over winter, and the leaves look really, really bad. But right now, if you go out and look at your Akuba, that new growth has started. Look at the new leaves. If there's no lesions on it, by all means, don't start applying fungicides. They're expensive and it's unnecessary. However, if that new growth shows lesions on it, you might want to catch it early so that it doesn't promote viral infection.
Well, you know, there's a disease that hits a lawn. Oddly enough, it's because you don't have enough nitrogen, or is it too much? I'm going to mention it. Red thread. Red thread. It looks like somebody took red thread off a spool and laced it in a little spot.
Absolutely. It's an interesting disease, but it's also one that's easily diagnosed because it does present itself.
It's right in your eye, yeah.
Exactly.
What's that red thread there in my lawn?
We've actually have a problem right now with pink snow mold, which is occurring.
Oh, yeah, that's another.
And that's one that's also very easily recognized, although sometimes confused with red thread. Red thread, they do suggest that it's a low level of nitrogen.
There's a little more nitrogen.
We do recommend boosting a little shot of nitrogen, collecting the clippings. That's important because that spore is active, and if you're just going to release it back into the environment, it's just going to reinfect. It's not usually lethal, but it's a fairly ugly-looking disease on the lawn. So you do want to try to resolve it if possible.
You have a very important part in the landscape world because there's a lot of, and they're good guys. There's nothing wrong. Lawnmower guys just go and mow lawn, but you really need to have somebody like your company, T.B.I, to come out there and really examine some of your bushes and examine the lawns and so forth to see whether there's scale in the euonymus or if there's thrips and so forth and leafhoppers and molds and grubs and the lawn.
Absolutely, and I think it's important that people recognize that grass won't grow everywhere, and sometimes through other cultural management, you need to put something else into place. If it's too shady to support turf, use a ground cover. The main goal is to make the entire landscape attractive.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a ground cover that I was at my home when I bought it way back a long time ago, back in the 70s. At any rate, it was ivy as a ground cover. That's what the people had it before. I'm telling you folks, they should outlaw that plant as a ground cover. It takes over the whole world. It'll crawl up the walls and into your bedroom, right into your bed almost.
I agree. I find that to be an invasive crop.
Woo!
And unfortunately, you can put a lot of things into that same category, including a lot of our insect problems, which are things that we promoted. Ivy came from the English, and they could have kept it on their side of the pond, in my opinion.
Hey, Tom, we got about 2 minutes left. What else would you like to say to our viewing audience? If you have made any notes there, what would you like to, before we wrap it up?
We've covered most of our areas. I do want to just make a suggestion that
What's that?
Before the knee-jerk reaction of starting ripping out the landscape, give it a little chance to promote some growth. Everything is late, but in most cases you'll find leaves falling off plants, but they're being replaced with new tissue, and it's healthy tissue. So if you can tolerate it a couple of more weeks before making those hard decisions. Now, I'm not trying to take business away from the garden center.
No.
Because we're all in concert
you're just
together.
facing reality.
And the other thing that I would like to say is that, mentioning the cultural practices, really look at the tags before you replace a plant. Make sure you understand how big it's going to be, how much space it needs, what its watering needs are, whether it grows in sun or shade. A lot of these problems can be resolved by putting the proper plant in the proper spot.
Proper place. That's right, yes. I've always said, too, that we got only about a minute left. The heart of the plant is the roots, folks. The heart of the plant is the roots.